So, as you might have seen in the title slide, today we're going to be talking about a topic known as approaching the Guru. But before we do that, let's just do some pranam mantras. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militamena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Dinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pashata Deshatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Awesome. So again, today's topic is going to be on approaching Guru, and this is a very broad topic with a lot of details. And again, I'm not qualified to speak on it, but I hope that I can at least talk about the foundational and introductory aspects of it. Some topics that we're going to cover today. Some topics we're going to be covering today is the importance of learning through the disciplic succession, the importance of a guru, and then what is the qualifications of a proper guru and disciple, and then what is the exchange that happens when all of these conditions are met. And then finally, I'll end with the personal story. So to start off, let's talk about the importance of the disciplic succession. And the reason I want to start here before diving into any verse or shastras is that it's a very foundational concept. We hear it again and again. And when I grew up hearing it, I wasn't always sure what it meant or why it was so important. So let's just briefly talk about it. So, we all move through this world, and one thing we try to do every single day is learn. From birth until death, every day we learn something new, as the saying goes, right? This can be in school, college, work, your relationships, and your experiences. And this is how we become who we are, through our learnings. But we as devotees know that we're more than just the material learnings. That's not the only thing that's useful in this world. We're very interested in learning the spiritual knowledge, the absolute truth, And this absolute truth, it means that it doesn't change. It doesn't have any dualities or any contamination, any bias, any interpretation. We want to learn the perfect truth, right? But the question is, how do we go about doing that, and what is the best way to do that? So let me take you one step back and say, how do you learn anything? And it's said that there's actually 3 ways we primarily acquire knowledge. First is through direct sense perception. That means that I use my eyes, ears, mouth, nose, skin to touch and feel and understand things about the world. This is how babies often learn a lot of things, through their senses. The second way of learning is through inference. I make a hypothesis about something, and then I go out into the world and I try to prove or disprove it. And finally, the last one is called the word of authority, which means listening to somebody else who's expert in that field, and then listening to what they have to say in order to learn. But these 3 ways of learning knowledge are not made equal. And in fact, there's 4 defects we have as conditioned living beings that stop us from this learning in many ways. First is that we have imperfect senses. I'm wearing glasses because I can't see properly without them, right? And even if you don't have glasses, if you have so-called 20/20 vision, you can only see so far and in so much light. It's not perfect, right? The second thing is that we have a tendency to be illusioned, right? We as human beings, if we walk in the desert for many, many days on a hot, bearing sun, what will you start to see? The mirage, right? Fake imaginations of water being present there. So we get very easily illusioned in this world. And then we also have a tendency to commit many mistakes. We all take tests, especially in school, right? But not everybody gets 100% every single time because we're made to make mistakes. And finally, we have a tendency to cheat because we all, in some way or another, have a desire to do something, and we like to manipulate the world so that we can achieve that desire. So because of these 4 defects we have as conditioned living beings, the 3 ways of learning aren't created equal. And in fact, it said that the first 2, they lose their potency. Well, the first one is obvious. Because we have imperfect senses, we can't purely rely upon them for learning, right? So direct sense perception is gone. The second one is inference. What's wrong with this? Well, when I make a hypothesis and I go to try to prove or disprove it, I'm first using my mind and intelligence to create that hypothesis. And then I'm using my senses to collect data to prove or disprove it. So ultimately, all of these are weaknesses because our mind and intelligence are illusioned, they commit mistakes, and we like to cheat. And then our senses, of course, have the same issue. So as you can see, it's pretty obvious that we can't rely upon the first two ways of learning, which means we're only left with the word of authority. And you might say, I don't like listening to other people. That sounds really, really bad. I would never do that. Well, I'm here to tell you that we actually do it every single day. When we go to the doctor, we tell them all about our private information. We give our bodies to them to take care of because they're the authority. If they prescribe a medicine, we take it because they know what's best and we just listen. That's our duty, right? And then if we go to school as kids, right, we don't question the teacher in everything they teach. We just blindly listen, of course asking proper inquiries, but we listen to them because they're the authority on that subject. So my point is, word of authority is a very common experience in the material world itself. So now, when we come to the spiritual world, we should definitely also use this approach. But how do we listen to word of authority in the spiritual context? This means that we should learn the absolute truth from the proper way. And the best way to learn something is actually from the source itself, right? Not just an authority, but the source of authority is the best authority. That might sound a little vague, so let me try to explain it. Tonight we're here for the Sunday Love Feast, and later we'll eat some nice sumptuous prasadam, right? And maybe there's a sweet you really like. So you say, oh, I wish I could have the recipe for this sweet so I can make it for Krishna at my house and enjoy more later. Well, there's 3 ways you could figure out this recipe. First, you could try to use your tongue and your own knowledge of cooking to taste this sweet and say, I think there's this much of this ingredients put together and combined in this way, and that's the recipe. Now, if we just try to do it that way, it's not going to come out very good, right? So you can take it one step further. You can say, let me make hypotheses and test them out. I think this is a recipe, or I think that's a recipe. Let me go home and try all these different batches and see which one works out. But as you keep doing this, you'll see that it takes time, energy, effort, and often you still won't get to the proper answer. But instead, if you go to the cook who made that sweet, right, our temple devotees, and you ask them, what is in the sweet? Why is it so good? They'll tell you the recipe, and then you don't have to worry about any of this. So this is why it's best to learn from the source itself. And now when we come to the spiritual way, we also want to learn from the source. And we know the source of everything is Krishna, right? So how can we learn from Krishna? And that's what the disciplic succession is for. The disciplic succession is a line of unbroken teachers from generation to generation that take the knowledge from the source and pass it down all the way so that we can access it. And we follow the disciplic succession, which starts from Krishna, and of course it goes down to Srila Prabhupada and other disciples of his. And you can see a good chart here to explain it, right? We belong to the Brahma Madhav Gauriya Sampradaya, and therefore our line of spiritual teachers follow this order. And you can see a lot of our prominent Vaishnava acharyas belong in this list, And when we follow the disciplic succession, what we're sure of is that we receive nothing but the truth, When the knowledge is passed down, all these souls are very empowered that they don't manipulate it, contaminate it, or make it biased in any way. They just pass it down as it is, all the way through. And that's how we know that the knowledge we get from Srila Prabhupada's books, for example, is perfect and pure. And since now we learned that the 2 ways of learning, apart from word of authority, are very imperfect, we must rely upon word of authority. And so the best authority we could follow is the Vedic scriptures, which come through this disciplic succession. They carry all the knowledge which we need, and they are the absolute truth, right? So the Vedic scriptures are the authority. And today we have books like the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, which are all corollaries or commentaries of these Vedic scriptures that we can easily access. And we don't read the Gita, we read the Gita as it is, because it's been passed down as it is. That's another point, right? And the interesting thing is that we have them as books nowadays, but we only had them since Prabhupada wrote them. What about before then? Right? The Vedas were still there, but in sound form. They're called Shruti because they're the sound vibration of the Supreme. And in the previous ages, these souls were so empowered that they could pass down the Shruti without forgetting, without contaminating, or without messing up. But then once Vyasadeva got it and everything, right? Narada Muni was instructing him, and we all know, they understood that in the age of Kali Yuga, we're all so fallen, we can't keep up this purity, so better to write it down and have it in physical format so we can all read it without any questions of who said what, who said where. We just have it written down in plain words. And of course, Srila Prabhupada was kind enough to translate it from the Indian languages to all the languages of the world so that everybody could access this knowledge. So you can even see, it's actually curious in this picture here, right? You have Krishna telling that information to Lord Brahma, and you see there's like a string because it's a sound vibration that goes to Brahma's ear. And this is how it gets passed down through the whole disciplic succession. And we're also fortunate that we can easily access this knowledge today. So the Vedas, what should we think of them as, right? They're not just some random old books. We understand that they're the supreme truth. And as such, we must use them as an instruction manual for life. Anything we want to do in our life, we should look back and see, what do the Vedas say? And let me give you an example of why this is important. Personally, right now I'm working an internship at a consulting firm. And one thing we always do for our clients is we create a North Star. What's your goal? And then your guiding principles. And if you do this in the beginning of a project, then as you proceed, you'll understand, where does the client want to go? Are we really going towards it? And if we ever have to make an important decision, we can go back to the guiding principles and see, is this matching with our goal, and will this help us get there? So in that same way, think about our North Star as going back to home, back to Godhead, right, with Krishna. And our guiding principles can be found in the Vedic scriptures. So if we simply reference them in every point of our lives, we'll have the knowledge we need to succeed. So this is the importance of the Vedas, and we can only receive them, as I said before, through the disciplic succession. So now I hope you see how these two ideas combine foundationally to create the knowledge which we all depend upon to learn the absolute truth. Okay. Now you might say, Hari, that sounds great. We have these books. So if I just read these books and just follow them perfectly, I can just go back to Godhead by that itself, right? And the answer is not exactly. That's where the spiritual master and the guru comes in. Let me explain why. Let me give you another analogy to explain why, actually. In today's world, we have knowledge that is very easily accessible. For example, the field of medical science, right? I can go on Amazon and order 50 medical textbooks right now, and they'll be here in 2 days at Amazon Prime. But just because I read those 50 textbooks, does it mean I'm a doctor? Or does it mean I'm a good or qualified doctor? Definitely not. I'll gain some knowledge here and there and understand something. But we don't go to doctors who just read a couple books. We go to doctors who go to institutions where they can learn from the qualified teachers who are expert in this field and learn systematically on how to become successful at it. So in that same way, we should not just learn the Vedic scriptures by our own reading and understanding. When we do so, it'll be imperfect. We should learn in a systematic way from a bona fide spiritual teacher. And that's why we have institutions like ISKCON to gain this knowledge, to allow for these relationships to occur, and to distribute this knowledge to everybody to have. So this is the importance of a guru. And one more comparison you can make can be found here. There's a field of study known as geology, right? Like you might call it the study of rocks, to put it very simply. But geologists, one thing they're often employed for after they finish their studies is that energy companies will hire them to find places where they can source oil from. Oil is like gold, it's very hard to find, but geologists, they know how the earth is formed, in which places, in which shapes, and what conditions are there for the oil to be perfect, right? And then they'll go to the energy companies and say, look here, dig here 5,000 feet under, you get all the oil you need. So think about our spiritual teacher, our guru, as an expert geologist, our spiritual geologist. They can find exactly where they need to look for us to find the absolute supreme truth and the most valuable knowledge that we need to advance past our difficulties in life, right? So this is the importance of having a guru, and I hope these two analogies can give you some understanding of it. But now, instead of me trying to convince you more and more about the subject, we just finished proving that the Vedic scriptures are the word of authority that we should listen to, right? So why don't we see what they themselves say on this topic? First, on the topic of what we should be doing, the Bhagavad Gita is there, and of course we know that's Krishna's song to Arjuna. And in chapter 4, verse 34, it says, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So this is what Krishna is telling Arjuna on this exact topic. And I think it's really beneficial if we read the purport together. It's a little bit long, but I hope we can get through it. Of course, written by His Grace Srila Prabhupada. You can just read in your head as I read out loud. The path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following this principle of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and a person in the disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to his disciple. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of the foolish pretenders. The Bhagavatam 6.3.19 says, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path. Nor, by independent study of books of knowledge, can one progress in spiritual life. See, that point there. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination of her spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and increase. A bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind toward the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and increase becomes perfect. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, there's a lot in there, right? There's a lot to unpack. And I hope you can already start to see some of the points we already discussed, like the disciplic succession and the importance of that. And then to go into more of the details, let me investigate some more questions and see what the Vedic scriptures have to say. You could think about this verse as answering the question, what should we do? You know, Krishna says, approach the spiritual master and learn the truth from him. So that's the direction in that verse. The next question is, why should we do this? Now, as part of the 4 Vedas, there's actually the Yajur Veda, and inside that, there's something called the Shveta Upanishad. And one verse there is particularly important. It goes like this. Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha guru tasyete katita harta prakashante mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. Now, what does this mean? To put it simply, it means that once you take shelter of a spiritual master and surrender unto him and have faith in him and the Lord, only then are you qualified enough to really understand the essence of the Vedic scriptures. If you try to do it yourself without this proper connection and faith, even though you may be this intelligent or that intelligent of a great scholar, you won't really understand the essence. So this is what this verse is trying to tell us. So now we understood why we should do it in a very simple fashion. Now the question comes, what happens when we take shelter of a spiritual master? What is the benefit we get out of it? So the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Madhya Lila, it goes like this for one verse. Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bija. What does this mean? According to their karma, all living entities are wandering throughout the entire universe. Some of them are being elevated to the upper planetary systems, and some of them are going down to the lower planetary systems. Out of many millions of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with the bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. By the mercy of both Krishna and the spiritual master, such a person receives the seed of the creeper of devotional service. So the most important line here is the last one. When we approach a guru and surrender unto him with submission and service, what we get is the seed of devotional service, the seed of bhakti, right? And then it grows into a creeper. And in order to get this seed, to start our spiritual journey, we need the spiritual master. So this is what happens when you do that. And Srila Prabhupada really likes this verse. He talks a lot about it. And one of the key ideas that come from his commentary is that this famous saying, by the mercy of Krishna, one gets guru, and by the mercy of guru, one goes back to Krishna. So this is what this verse is trying to say. You must have faith in both the guru and Krishna and serve both of them simultaneously in order to advance and really grow in your bhakti. So this is the importance of a guru there. So you'll say, okay, Hari, you talk so much about what happens if we do all these things, all the benefits. But what if I don't really want to do this? What will happen to me? And the Chaitanya Charitamrita also has some topic about that. And in the Adi Lila 135, the purport has this important paragraph. One should always remember that a person who is reluctant to accept a spiritual master and be initiated is sure to be baffled in his endeavor to go back to Godhead. One who is not properly initiated may present himself as a great devotee, but in fact, he is sure to encounter many stumbling blocks on his path of progress towards spiritual realization, with the result being that he must continue his term of material existence without relief. Such a helpless person is compared to a ship without a rudder, for such a ship can never reach its destination. It is imperative, therefore, that one accept a spiritual master if he at all desires to gain the favor of the Lord. So you can tell here, it's pretty serious, right? What is the comparison being made? You can see in the top left, right? It said that if you don't have a spiritual master to follow in life, you're like a ship without a rudder. And what a rudder I circled in red, it's basically the part of the ship that gets moved as the steering wheel gets moved. So if you don't have a rudder, you can't direct your ship to go right or left or wherever you need to go. So obviously it's a very critical aspect, right? So just like that in our own lives, if we don't have our spiritual master, we won't be able to turn this way or that way to go back to the shore, which is back to Godhead, right? And this analogy is very popular in the Shastras. Another verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, verse 22, the purport describes, or the translation describes, the spiritual teacher is like the captain of the ship for those who desire to cross the difficult ocean of Kali, right? And again, one more time, it's mentioned because Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the human life is like a beautifully constructed boat, and our spiritual master is like the captain of that boat. If we try to navigate the material miseries, the ocean of Kali, without any captain, we'll just sink and we'll lose hope, right? But only with that captain can we reach the shore and reach our destination. And the word that's used repeatedly in all of these is Karnadara, because it means captain. So our spiritual master is our Karnadara. So I hope this can explain to you why we need a spiritual master. It's really important. Now finally, how should we think of the spiritual master and what is their true importance? And this verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam really highlights that. It says, Yasya Sakshad Bhagavati Jnana Deepa Prade Guru Maryasa Di Shrutam Tasya Sarvam Kunjara Sochavat. The spiritual master should be considered to be directly the Supreme Lord because he gives transcendental knowledge for enlightenment. Consequently, for one who maintains the material conception that the spiritual master is an ordinary living being, everything is frustrated. His enlightenment and his Vedic studies and knowledge are like the bathing of an elephant. The last line might be confusing, but let me explain. The elephant, it's really known because it's such a big animal and it gets really dirty over the day, right? So every once in a while it'll go to take its bath in a pond or a river or something, right? So it'll take its trunk, wash itself, clean itself very nicely. But then a couple minutes later, it'll just walk back into the dirt and shower itself with dirt all over again. So what it's saying here, this verse, is that if we consider the spiritual master to be another ordinary living human being, right? All our progress in our Vedic studies won't really be useful and will be going nowhere. We really need to understand that the spiritual master is God himself or a representative of God, because they come down from the disciplic succession, line after line, teacher after teacher. So this is how we should think of the spiritual master. So I hope this section has summarized for you, why is it important to get a spiritual master? What does the Shastra say? And what happens when we do this? What happens when we don't do this? And what is the importance? But now you'll say, okay, Hari, that's great. I understood all of that. But there's so many teachers out there today, so many gurus saying so many things. Who do we trust? And how do we know whether somebody's truly qualified to become my spiritual teacher, right? And that's where the qualifications of a proper guru come in. Again, one more time, let's go back to see what the Shastras themselves say on this topic, because they're the only ones that can best guide us. It said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11.3.21, Tasmad gurum prapadyate jignasu shraya uttamam shabde pare cha nishnatam brahmani upashama shrayam. Therefore, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of the bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual master. So right there I counted 4 qualifications that were given for a proper guru, right? They must not be so materially attached. They have to get rid of everything and just surrender into the Supreme Lord. They must understand what the scriptures say by their own reading and practice, and they must be able to preach this message to save the masses. And finally, they should be able to make sure that they convince others, right? So that's the important thing. This is what the Srimad Bhagavatam has to say on this verse, right? But there's some more qualifications we can explore within the Vedic scriptures. So we can look to the Nectar of Instruction as an additional reference. Of course, this is written by Rupa Goswami, one of the 6 main Goswamis, and in text 1 itself, he says, Vacho Vegam Manasakrodha Vegam, Jiva Vegam Udarapashta Vegam, Ethan Vegan Yo Vishaheta Dira, Sarvam Apimam Pritivim Sashishyat. This means any sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the reactions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So here, Rupa Goswami is listing the 6 symptoms of a proper and qualified guru. So again, it's very clear what they should be like, and you can't really just trust anybody who says that they're a guru. If they follow these qualifications, that's how you can really know. And to make it even more simple, I sort of just made this checklist I found from combining all the different references, that talk about this subject. And here it says that the qualifications of a proper guru, first, he must come in the line of the disciplic succession. We talked all about what that means, right? So when they come in this line, it's powerful because what they're doing is not preaching their own message, their own philosophy. They're actually saying what they heard from their teacher and their teacher and their teacher and so on. And of course, that goes all the way back to Krishna. So this is why we care about the disciplic succession so much. We don't want to hear anybody's commentary. We want to hear Krishna's words himself, right? The second thing was that he must have realized the conclusion of the scriptures by application and deliberation. That sounds really fancy. What it means is that they must have once been a student, heard these scriptures from a bona fide guru, practiced them over time, and become expert at following them. And this is how they'll be qualified enough to understand the essence of the Vedic scriptures. Like in today's world, a lot of people get misled by expert Sanskrit scholars and singers and reciters. But a proper guru doesn't have to be any of those things. They don't need to sing Sanskrit really well. They need to know what the Sanskrit is saying for us to, take them as a teacher. So this is what that means. And as they keep doing this, obviously, we must make sure that they follow a lifestyle which is fixed in devotional service, right? They can't be completely materially attached and entangled there if they want to be a spiritual teacher. They must be doing some sort of service or another. And, the saying goes, they must always be thinking of Krishna 24/7, as should all of us. The other thing, which was already mentioned from Rupa Goswami, is that a spiritual teacher has controlled senses, right? It's not somebody who does anything they want. They do things that are said in the Vedic scriptures. And finally, the final one on the checklist there is be an acharya, which means be somebody who teaches by personal example. So we don't want people who say one thing and do another thing. We don't want them to be our teachers. A lot of people can do that. The truly bona fide gurus don't even have to say some things, right? There's a saying in America, in the Western world, great leaders teach everybody, and sometimes they speak. That's somehow what it goes like, right? What it means is that you don't have to say everything in order for other people to learn it or to learn it from you. All you have to do is lead by example, and the spiritual teacher must be just like that as well. And there's a few things that a guru doesn't have to be as well, right? In the modern world, there's so much confusion about who's saying what's true, right? A lot of gurus, they demand money for special mantras, to get this qualification or that. But money is not really a factor. Anybody can earn money. That's not what a spiritual advancement means. So you shouldn't trust a guru who just asks for money for this and that. Also, a guru won't be doing things in a very, in a very extravagant way. They won't be showing off. They'll be very humble in appearance and do everything just for the bare minimum sake. They're just moving through this material world to teach everybody else what to do. So these are some qualifications of the guru and what you shouldn't be looking for when you look for a guru. One more thing is that a guru doesn't have to be a guru by birthright. What I mean is they don't have to be born in this country, in this caste, in this time period, in this environment. A guru is not somebody who's born as a guru, but becomes a guru. They take on these qualities, they leave behind what's bad, and by example they lead, right? So this is who a guru is. You don't have to see the color of their skin, where they live, how old they are. That's not relevant. That's what I'm just trying to say so that we can understand what do we care about for a proper guru and what do we not care about. So I hope that explains that. And now I talked a lot about the proper guru, but it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way one. In order to take a guru, we must be a proper disciple as well. So let's think about what that means. It means that not anybody can just go approach a spiritual master and go back to Godhead simply. You must have certain conditions that you must meet. And again, let's see what the Vedic scriptures have to say on this topic. The Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Madhya Lila says, Guru Padashraya Diksha Guru Rasevana Saddharma Shiksha Pricha Sadhu Marga Anugamana. On the path of regulative devotional service, one must observe the following items. One must accept a bona fide spiritual master. One must accept initiation from him. One must serve him. One must receive instructions from the spiritual master and make inquiries in order to learn devotional service. One must follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas and follow the directions given by the spiritual master. So again, there's already a mini checklist given right there for what we should do, right? Not only should you find a spiritual master and surrender, which is the first two, but you must be having a mood of service and submission, right? Serving means that you do anything the guru asks you to do, and submission means having the humility to listen to what your guru has to say, so that you could not only hear the instructions, but have the power to follow them. And the important thing for any teacher-student relationship is the power of asking questions. We must always keep asking questions to our spiritual master in order to progress in our spiritual life. And again, the fifth point is interesting because it's hitting that idea of doing what's been done already. We want to follow the previous acharyas. We don't want to make up our own ideas or our own philosophies. We just want to follow what's been done before, because what works, we want to keep continuing. And the reason I'm bringing a lot of these up is because if you look at the word disciple, where does it come from? Discipline, right? So you need spiritual discipline in order to become a spiritual disciple. And so what Prabhupada is saying in all of these, Vedic references is that these are how you these are how you cultivate the qualities necessary to become a spiritually disciplined person. And again, here's some more principles you can think about when you want to be following that spiritual discipline. You must have faith in your spiritual master and the process of devotional service. What does that mean? If your spiritual master tells you something, you believe it, because the words of your spiritual master are as good as your spiritual master themselves, right? Also, the disciple must be sincere and submissive. I already spoke about this, but the sincerity part is important. A lot of people do spirituality or follow this path, maybe in a way for following their own agenda, for getting this or getting that, their own material desires. But that's not what we're interested in the spiritual path. The path of Bhakti Yoga is about being sincere in our love for Krishna. So if you have that sincerity at heart, then you'll be even more empowered to properly understand the spiritual master's instructions. Then the third one is the disciple must be serious about the advancement of Krishna consciousness and committed to the process. This again hits that same point. Don't have an agenda behind why you're doing these things. Do them because you want to humbly learn from your teacher and advance and go back to Krishna. And there's so many more references for what we could talk about, but I found this list which is pretty interesting here from the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is written by Sanatana Goswami as a book for Vaishnavas to understand the rules and regulations that have to be followed by them. And so there's a big list here of the qualifications that Sanatana Goswami says that bona fide disciples should be following. And then of course, then they'll be empowered enough to do services and progress in their spiritual life. So we'll just read them one by one. First one is, he should be devoted to the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Second one is, he should be fully capable of upholding the vows made to the spiritual master. Third one, he should be engaged day and night in the Lord's service with body, mind, and words. He should be desirous of knowing the absolute truth. He should be spotless in character, truthful, gentle and polite, pleasing in appearance, and intelligent. He should show proper respect to elders, to initiated Vaishnavas, and to the Lord. He should observe silence concerning material subjects, don't talk about them, and should have control over his senses. And finally, he should have no attraction for committing sinful activities. So you can see this list is pretty steep. It's a high bar that's set, right? But this is really what's required as per the Vedic scriptures in order to be qualified to be a bona fide disciple. And now we talked about the guru coming from the disciplic succession, passing down the Vedic teachings. We talked about the qualifications of a proper guru. And now we just finished talking about the qualifications of a proper disciple. So what happens when you combine all these elements together, right? That's when you get the exchange between the guru and the disciple, that really mellow relationship. And here's a good summary of what happens here, right? Before you enter into the guru and disciple relationship, the guru must study the disciple, and the disciple must study the guru. This two-way street is very important, right? Because we talked about there's not qualifications just for one side, but for both sides. And it's not only a spiritual idea. I'll tell you a personal example. Like right now, I'm applying for jobs, right? And in every interview, of course, the company is interviewing me. But at the end of every interview, they always ask, So what questions do you have for us? Because even in the material world, a lot of these relationships are two-way, and really successful things can come up when both agree with their own qualifications. So the same idea applies spiritually. You must really know who is a proper guru, and do they follow all these criteria, and simultaneously the guru will observe the disciple and say, are they really qualified to become a disciple? And when you have both these things, then the student can approach the teacher and establish the relationship through the initiation, of course, right? And what happens next? The disciple must have faith and constantly surrender unto the spiritual master. And when they do this, the relationship will start growing. And it'll grow even further when the disciple takes all these instructions faithfully and serves the guru and inquires deeply from them again and again. And so this can tell you the exact way which we must go in order to really develop a strong guru and disciple relationship. And the Vedas, again, they say a couple more things about how potent this relationship is. It said that there's a loving exchange when this happens, right? The first one, the Srimad Bhagavatam says, the transcendental knowledge communicated from guru to disciple is compared to the fire which burns the darkness of ignorance to ashes, bringing great happiness both to the guru and the disciple. The second one is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, from a purport. It says, the expert spiritual master knows well how to engage his disciple's energy in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, and thus he engages a devotee in a specific devotional service according to their special tendency. And finally, the last Srimad Bhagavatam reference here will say, if the spiritual master is bona fide, and if the disciple is sincere and obedient, then the communication between guru and disciple is just like nectar, both for the guru and the disciple. So now you can really tell how valuable following all these different aspects I've outlined together. And when you combine them together, you get this loving exchange. And honestly, this is what we're most interested in, right? Getting this spiritual relationship. Because one thing is certain, we come into this world with nothing and then we leave this world with nothing, right? But we have something actually. We come into this world with a connection to Krishna. He's within all of us as Paramatma. And we can leave this world getting a connection with the spiritual master, and that'll be permanent as well. Every other relationship, whether we like to hear it or not, is temporary and confined to our one life, whether it's family or friends or relationships, right? So we invest so much time and energy into all of those every single day. So why can't we take some time to invest in our relationship with getting a spiritual master and going back to Krishna, right? That's the true importance of our life. And that's pretty much finishes the presentation I had today on the subject, but I wanted to end with a personal story. So again, I'm not really qualified to speak on any of this. It's not like I'm following all of this perfectly, right? I'm only doing so I can purify myself, but also because I really like this topic. It's something that I didn't hear a lot about growing up, and I always wondered the basic things. What is the disciplic succession? Why should I even get a guru? And even more recently, it became very relevant to me because in the end of August of this year, I actually approached a spiritual master myself, and I was accepted as an aspiring disciple of His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu. And doing so was a great blessing because it wasn't something I really imagined, And how this started was because when the pandemic hit last year in March, that summer we were all stuck at home, all on our laptops on Zoom. But the one blessing that came out of that is that boundaries were no longer there. It's not like I could only go to our temple here and only talk to our people here. I could talk to anybody in the world, and really there's a lot of inter-country and interstate cooperation and communication going on. So as a result of this, and as the result of Krishna's mercy, I somehow came into contact with some devotees from California, from the ISKCON or Silicon Valley Temple there, especially the youth. And I was really amazed by them because they were all like my age, and especially younger than me too, but they're all very devout in their spiritual practice. And I understood this because they pointed me to His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu, who's the manager of the temple there, and he's the Siksha and Diksha Guru of most people in that congregation. And then through their, pushing a little bit, they actually invited me to come to listen to Maharaj's programs that he was having on a weekly basis online. And as I kept on hearing, I started liking more of what I heard. It was actually like a Western preaching program I attended, but the way he explained things was very perfect, and I learned a lot of fundamental things myself. So after many months of doing this and attending more of his programs, what I realized is that I found somebody who I like listening to and has all the perfect qualities. And perhaps it would be a good idea for me to take one step forward. And what really hit me was a couple months ago, I was just chanting, and it's a very funny story. I was just chanting, and I was like in a forest, right? There's a lot of trees around me, and I sort of had this small realization, like, if I don't take my chanting seriously, who knows? I may become one of these trees and live hundreds of years doing nothing, just lying around here, right? So I better take this seriously and make some progress. And I thought I had all this momentum going for me with all my association and hearing and everything, right? So maybe if I miss this chance now, who knows how long I'll have to wait to get it again. So that's why in August, I actually approached His Grace Vaishekha Prabhu, and I asked him to be my spiritual master, and he accepted me as an aspiring disciple, and so it was very perfect. And the pictures you see above, I'll just briefly explain them. The one on the left is actually 1 month later from when I became an aspiring disciple. He had his birthday. His Vyasa Puja was there in Silicon Valley. So I actually flew to San Francisco and attended it. And of course, I got the chance to get association with him and get that beautiful picture. And then the one on the right is actually from a couple weeks ago when Maharaj passed through New York City on his way to England for his trip there. And then I got even more time to spend with him, serve him, and get to know him. So it was really nectarian to have this relationship, and I'm really excited to grow further in it. And I guess what I wanted to do is speak on this topic today so that one, I could learn what it means to be a proper disciple and why I have to take this process seriously, so for my own purification. And I hoped that me telling you this also inspired you, or at least reminded you of this importance, because I'm sure all of you already know. With that, I conclude and I ask for your blessing so that I may advance spiritually and one day be ready for initiation. Hare Krishna. Yeah, you can ask questions. I can't guarantee I'll answer them. Sure, Prabhu.
Yeah, so we're all very proud of you, Hari.
Thank you,
for having taken so much seriousness and give us a lot of hope and inspiration to the younger kids and the other kids with your peers. And we are all very happy that the process works, the system works. Otherwise many of our religious organizations we see it's just the first generation who holds on tight, the second generation is looking for ways to get out of this so they can not be associated with their temple or whatever. But it's so nice to see our whole generation is so excited about Krishna consciousness. So we're very proud of you.
Thank you.
I think she's a comments.
Yeah, just this one question for, so you can share how your experience and how your feelings are now that you have made a commitment of chanting 16 rounds. Can you please share with us how it feels and how it has changed that commitment? Does it feel heavy or whatnot?
Yeah, at the beginning I was sort of like, I can't do 16 rounds, that's so much, right? And actually, there was a time in the pandemic I was barely chanting any rounds. But one thing I learned, a secret to success, is that you just make step-by-step increase, right? You can't go from 0 to 16, but what I did is I just went from 0 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, and eventually if you keep doing it slowly by slowly, you'll realize like we as human beings, we have the capacity to change. We're very flexible, right? So we can always do more if we really want to. And there's a famous saying, right? It's not a problem of time, it's a problem of priority. So if we really prioritize doing this, any devotional service, especially chanting, then we can easily do it. It's just a matter of making our mind up for it, right? And of course, the best thing to do, not that I'm following it perfectly, is to do it in the morning, because chanting is really potent to calm you down and to center you and connect you with the higher powers, especially Krishna himself and the spiritual teachers. If we do it in the morning when we're really focused and engaged, then it's so much more powerful, and that's what I'm starting to discover myself. So that's just some of my humble learnings.
Haribo!
For anyone who's also considering taking initiation and struggling to figure out who to take initiation from, because there's a lot of gurus in ISKCON. So what advice would you give to those people?
I'd say hearing is the best way, because there's Shravanam Kirtan Vishnu. Just by hearing others, we can understand the knowledge. And the more great teachers you hear from, the more you'll understand. And then you can sort of tell, depending on your personality, your proclivities, who fits your personality type and who fits your aspirations, right? So that's sort of how I did it. Not that I did it properly, but that's my recommendation. Just hear as much as you can. That's what I've heard from my teachers. Yeah. Thank you all again, and thank you to all of you for inspiring me so much. Thank you so much.